Hey kids, and welcome to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most famous and I think most misunderstood parables. Well, I guess it's not a parable, but stories in the New Testament. And we're talking about when Jesus and the disciples fed the 5,000, or the multitude, because it was more than 5,000 people according to the story. Now, I'm going to link the chapter and verse down in the description so you can look it up in your scripture, your translation, because there's a bunch of different translations and there's different words. So I am paraphrasing, but I want you to read and comment what you think. So here we are. Jesus is tired. It's late in the evening. He's like ready to go, and he's like kind of chilling near the water as usual. And there's people following him. Lots of people. Jesus is a rock star at this point. People want healing. So the apostles, as usual, and if you've ever been a program director or an MC, you're kind of like whoever the big guy is, you're kind of keeping everybody away and you're keeping everything flowing. They said, okay, time's up. They can go to the city, they can go get some food. Well, Jesus said, nah, we'll just feed them. Well, if you've ever worked in the catering business, and you've ever heard those words, well, I'll just do 5,000 people, just feed them. That's a huge order when you only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. So how do you feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish? Easy. One person at a time. I know that sounds funny, but here you go. As a chef and as a minister, as someone who has seen a crowd of 5,000 people, I can tell you, I can tell you, looking out into a crowd of 5,000 people, if you threw everybody something, not everybody's going to eat. Only half a crowd, part of a crowd. That doesn't make a difference. I mean, it doesn't matter. Not everybody in the crowd is going to eat. So even though you're feeding a crowd, doesn't mean you're feeding an entire crowd. But we're still talking over 5,000 people. How is that possible? Well, the thing is, Jesus just tells the apostles to do it. Just tells the disciples, actually. He just says, go, do it. Jesus didn't feed everybody. The apostles did. How did they do it? Because they didn't do it by themselves. Now, if one person, so let's say you have 5,000 people. We're just going to use the number 5,000 because that number's there. And you have 12 disciples. They each have to feed 416 people. It can be done. Pretty hard. It's going to take a little bit if you have the material to feed them. Now, if you look at the disciple and let's say a wife or a spouse or a friend, you're talking 24 people. Each person has to feed 208. A little easier. See where I'm going here? And if they each bring somebody, 104, 48 people. The more people you get to help, the easier the job is. And let me tell you, it just says they fed and everyone was satisfied and there was food left over in our baskets, in our 12 baskets. We don't know how big the baskets were. We don't know how big the fish were. We don't know what they fed. Maybe they made a fish stew. The apostles had 2 fish, 5 loaves. Didn't talk about what anybody else in the crowd had. If you ever heard the story of stone stew, I used to tell this to my youth group a long time ago. And stone stew is basically this guy comes into town and he is hungry, he's starving, he doesn't have anything except a pot. So he goes and he knocks on the door and he says, hey, could you get me something to eat? And the person just slams the door and says, no. So he goes from door to door and everybody just turns him down. So he takes this pot that he's been carrying around, he takes it to the middle of the city, town, village, probably a village because he's going to start a fire and he's going to start boiling water near the well. And he takes a rock from the ground, cleans it off, drops it into the pot. He sits there and waits for it to boil. And then he stirs. The townspeople start to look at him and they say, well, what is he doing? And then the water starts to boil and he kind of turns down the heat a little bit. He moves the coals and he takes a sip. Someone comes up to him and says, hey, what is going on? What are you doing here? Or you just have water in there. And he goes, no. I have this stone stew, man. You gotta try it. Needs a little salt, though. So he gives the guy a little ladle. Yeah, it needs some salt. It needs some other stuff, too. I'll tell you what, I'll get you some salt. Be right back. So he goes and gets some salt, and as he looks into his cupboard, he grabs a can of corn. He walks over to the pot and he goes, here's some corn. Let's throw that in there and a little salt. And they stir it around and they start to talk. And then the next neighbor comes up and goes, oh, man, that could sure use some of my fresh carrots. And it goes on and on like that. And then all of a sudden, this transient man, this homeless man that walks into a city, and he's turned away by everyone, is sitting with everyone in the community around him. And with a single stone and a little bit of water from a well, he brought the entire community together and everyone ate. And they took leftovers. Much like the story of Christ, we always look for the supernatural, but the story is the supernatural. The story is the holiness. Find where his blessing is. Christ's blessing comes to us and his mercy comes to us, but we have to understand where it's coming from. It's coming from a place of you go and do this, have faith, I have your back, you can do this. And every time he's called on his apostles or his disciples to do something, they were able to do that. And as we are thinking about the feeding of the multitudes, it's not our place to feed 5,000 people. It's our place to feed the person that's ahead of us and in front of us and take care of that person. Because some people are called to feed the multitudes and some people aren't. Some people are just called to gather them together. As you go into this Sunday, if you are a liturgical Christian like me, a Catholic, you're going to be hearing about this story. And I hope that you have a couple little questions going on in the back of your head when you're listening to the sermon this weekend. And just remember, the supernatural doesn't have to be found in magic. The supernatural can be found in the wind and in the miracles we see every day. So until next time, work hard, be kind, and have fun.